Three. Hello, horror fans. Pete here from the Lassercast, and we are on our road to Evil Dead Rise, which comes out April 21st. And so, me and my partner in crime, who has a shirt that's very telling, are here to talk about Darkman. Danny, why the heck would we pick Darkman if we're talking about Evil Dead?
Well, because it was directed by Sam Raimi. It stars, I don't want to say it stars. It has cast members who are Evil Dead associates. Bruce Campbell has a cameo. Bruce Campbell was actually pitched by Sam Raimi to play Darkman, which I think would have made it for a very different movie.
I agree.
Ted Raimi, of course, plays an essential character in this movie.
Yes.
And this is one of mine, and I think one of your favorite films. And it's early Sam Raimi. It's a crazy movie. We reviewed Drag Me to Hell last weekend. So we're kind of getting to Evil Dead Rise by way of the Evil Dead 2013 remake thing, which we both really liked.
Yep.
And then kind of piecing together through some of Sam Raimi's films.
Yes.
Even though Sam Raimi obviously does not direct Evil Dead Rise, that is Lee Cronin, it's still building up to Evil Dead. And plus, it just gives us a chance to talk about freaking Darkman because it's so good.
Yes. That is the best thing about this road to Evil Dead Rise is that every single movie we've talked about has been like a really fun, enjoyable movie so far.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been any kind of tough movie to get through. We're like, oh, well, we're going to get through this one next. Each one has been a pleasure. So let's talk about why this movie is a pleasure. It came out in 1990, right after the Tim Burton Batman movie, and you can clearly see connections to that movie. I mean, most notably is the Danny Elfman score, which makes it feel like it's a sequel to Batman in some kind of way, or like maybe Batman and Darkman are going to team up. But the reason why this movie exists is because Sam Raimi tried to get the rights for The Shadow, and he was rejected. And so he ended up writing a script for his own superhero, The Darkman, and he was very much inspired by Universal Studios horror movies from the 1930s. And I got to tell you, like the most obvious one is clearly the Invisible Man, right? With like the gauze on his face and like, you know, the kind of the hat and the coat. But just in general, doesn't this movie feel like half goofy superhero movie, half like Universal monster movie?
Yeah, it 100%. This movie, we kind of alluded to this off air when we were recording our Yellow Jackets review for episodes 1 and 2 of the new season, which you can watch now on the channel, like and subscribe. And and we were talking about like, oh, I can't wait till we get to talk about Darkman because this is like I said to you, I know why you love this movie because you are the biggest comic book fan that I know. And this is the best comic book movie ever made that is not actually based off of a comic, if that makes sense.
I think it does,
It is inspired, as you said, by comic characters. It's inspired by these, definitely the Invisible Man, which is probably my favorite of that and Bride of Frankenstein are my favorite of the original Universal monster movies. So I love every ounce of this movie. I love how goofy it is. I love how graphically violent it is. I love the way Raimi uses like these insane pull-ins to like inside Peyton Westlake's mind as it's like snapping before he goes crazy.
Right.
I love the traditional Raimi camera cuts. I like the way he films certain things to make Darkman feel like Batman in a way.
Yes.
I wrote this down. It feels like this is 1989's Batman.
Right.
Except if the Joker origin story was used to create a good guy.
Oh, that's a good little metaphor there.
Like
Comparison.
in 1989, in Tim Burton's Batman, you have, Jack Napier, right? Jack Nicholson's character is dropped into like a vat of acid, and like he's forced to have this like basement surgery, and he comes out looking like the Joker, and he puts on the makeup to cover it up, but he's like hideously scarred from this like acid bath and botched surgery. And the Joker, of course, is a psychotic villain. What if that happened to a very good person, a scientist? What if that idea, like the Killing Joke story, what if that happened to a scientist who was in a relationship, who's a totally really normal guy?
Yeah.
And the scarring left him like out, psychotically out for revenge, but he's a good guy. Right. That to me is what Darkman is, and I think everyone in this movie just plays it exactly to the level they need to play it at the moments they need to play it. Like, at some points in this movie, Liam Neeson, you're looking at him and you're like, yeah, that's the great actor I know from Schindler's List and Rob Roy and all these great movies, and Nell, these great like dramatic films that he would make almost immediately after this.
Right.
And then there's Liam Neeson, who would reinvent himself much later in his career as, I have a certain set of skills.
Right.
And only that, but like turned up to 11. You have 3 fucking time Oscar winner, Frances McDormand. Actually, she's a 4-time Oscar winner, 3-time Best Actress winner, Frances McDormand, as like the love interest who's, tied in with the bad guy. You have one of my favorite bad guys in movie history in Larry Drake's Durant.
Yep.
And then he's not even the real bad guy.
No.
Because you have Strank, right? Strack. Yeah. And played by Colin Friels, who, watching this movie watching this movie now, knowing it was made in 1990, I'm just going to go out and say it. I'm willing to bet Raimi based this character on Donald Trump.
That is really interesting that you said that, because I was thinking, just looking at his name, is he not Tony Stark?
So what if the Joker was a good guy, and what if Iron Man was the bad guy?
I mean, I'm probably just thinking because of his name. He's sort of like flamboyant in the role, especially at the very end of the movie. And Tony Stark in the comics, which this would just be Tony Stark in the comics at this point, was a lot more subdued than the way that Robert Downey Jr. portrays him. So it's probably not that, but I could see them when they're writing the script being like, all right, we got to come up with like an industrialist name, because it's going to be like something Industries, like Stark Industries. Okay, what about Strack Industries?
I could see that. I just figured, here's a mogul, a real estate mogul who's trying to build large buildings in the city,
right?
Who's obviously into shady business, paying people, covering things up,
right?
And who else does that sound like? Especially 1990, when I mean, Trump was at way before politics and President Trump. He was New York real estate guy. You couldn't walk around in New York and New Jersey without seeing his name on everything. And given that, and now all the timing of the indictment and everything, it just really feels, it feels like somebody today found Trump's Belisarius memorandum.
Yeah, I mean, you might be onto something there. It's interesting. One of my favorite episodes of Review by the Red Letter Media guys is when they talk about this movie. They talk about Darkman for a whole episode, and they were saying that this movie is very similar to RoboCop, right? Because
I could totally see those comparisons also, yeah.
right? Because you sort of have like the henchmen bad guys who like mutilate the good guy in both movies, right? And then the good guy gets the revenge on them, and then eventually he goes after the corporate head guy. And in this case, it's the real estate guy, Strack. But yeah, a lot of the points I'm going to make today are probably from that Red Letter Media video, so I definitely want to give them credit where credit's due. I could definitely see the Trump comparison, though. The movie itself, I think we should point out just how like kind of beautiful it looks too. It doesn't have the the artificial uh, architecture of the Batman movies. It very much looks like a modern, regular, everyday city. However, the shots themselves are like super gothic and interesting, especially towards the beginning when Darkman is essentially created. There's some really, really beautiful fucking shots in this movie in the very beginning. But go ahead.
I just wanted to make a, because I actually, while I was rewatching this the other day, his whole, because you brought up RoboCop, that whole, when he goes back to his lab after it's been blown up and he collects all of his things and he ends up going to that like broken down industrial park.
Yeah.
That's right out of the end of RoboCop. Like that's, Red from that 70s show fighting him and his gang fighting RoboCop. All this movie is missing is somebody getting like slimed in acid and melting on a when the car hits them.
Yes.
But yeah, no, that's I could totally see that. Even the idea of like all of Durant's gang have very distinctive personalities, and all of the bad guys in RoboCop have very distinct personalities.
Absolutely.
So that's even another connection. I could totally see that. Like, seriously, if you lined up RoboCop, Burton's Batman, and this, that is like the greatest triple threat movie experience you could have.
Yes. Like special powered or like enhanced by technology, good guy vigilante just taking out bad guys that are very quirky and weird. And I think we should talk about Durant and his crew. So my first experience with this movie, back in the day, my mom used to do this thing where I wouldn't be able to go see movies like this, but then she would tell me the story. And she described the scene in the very beginning with Durant and with the cigar slicer, right? And I just pictured that in my little kid imagination, and I was like, "Oh man, that's fucked up," And it's just so funny because no one has a costume on, but yet they are these sort of like Gotham-like villains. You have the one guy who's missing the leg, who's then hopping around as they're shooting with his leg. You have Durant with his collection of fingers. You have this
Smiley,
who's like laughing like a hyena. That's very Joker-esque, right? But I just really appreciated this group and their weird quirks. And when they were talking about the casting, I knew about Larry Drake because as a kid, for some reason, I watched LA Law, and he played like a special needs guy on LA Law.
He won 2 Emmys for that.
Right, and so I knew him from that. But then Sam Raimi didn't know about that. Like, he didn't see that performance. He just liked him because of his audition and how subdued he played the character. And I think that that's totally on the money. I think that's what's really interesting about the character is he's not just constantly like yelling or acting silly. He's very like serious and straightforward, but never boring. It always menacing, but very subtle.
So very menacing. Like even that opening scene.
Yeah.
I'll always forget I'll never forget the first time I saw this. Like, I would mimic the cigar cutting scene. He goes, I have 7 more points. And the look on the guy's face, and that's a huge man.
Yeah.
Like this like gangster who's trying to act tough in front of Durant and his crew. Yeah. And Durant and his crew take them out. There's also like just the way the movie opens with like this West Side Story-esque moment where all of this gangsters, goons, go and disarm Durant's crew. And you see like nunchucks getting thrown on the floor. And you're like, what am I watching? Is this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Like, what is happening?
Yes.
And then, of course, they rip off the guy's leg. It's a machine gun, and you're like, I'm in.
Yeah,
There's Durant cutting fingers off.
Yep.
He never breaks a sweat. He's very. I was reading on IMDb that his character was supposed to be ex-military.
Yes,
and so even the scenes in the helicopter where he's shooting the guns, he's handling all the weapons. He's not you have to do my dirty work for me. He's he almost reminds me of if the Kingpin wasn't the Kingpin. He could have, you know what I mean? Where he has that imposing force where he will do it himself, but he has a crew of guys to take care of lower level things for him.
Yes.
So he does have that Wilson Fisk kind of vibe to him.
Absolutely.
Cool, calm, and collected. And I just love how it goes from him, with this quiet, menacing force to Colin Friel's Strack, who is as over the top and cartoonish, especially at the end where he's he's telling the story about how he used to dance around on he used to go up to the top of the skyscrapers and dance around on the piles. It just absolutely insane. And he's firing the nail gun. He's cackling like a hyena. It's really good. Every character in this movie is so well defined, even in the short time they have on screen sometimes.
Right. Yeah, and so I think that we're kind of already starting to go into these waters, but we should talk about how it really sets the foundation for Spider-Man, right? And really just comic book movies in general, because you have these characters, these over-the-top villains, but like we said, it's already kind of like movies that have come before it, like Batman and RoboCop. But there are shots and sequences in the movie that is specific shots from some of the Spider-Man films by Sam Raimi. The one that's the most obvious to me.
I know what you're going to say. Go for it.
Is at the very end when Frances McDormand is falling and then she's caught by the part of the construction site, which that's just the end of Spider-Man 3. I think that literally happens to Mary Jane.
Yeah. I feel like that's a scene in every Spider-Man movie where, damsel falls, Spider-Man swings down. The only difference here is it's Darkman with his freaking half burnt off face and his ragged teeth swinging like a crazy person. And then doing a swinging drop kick to the bad guy.
Yes. Chef's kiss, man, is beautiful. And so I think we should talk about the connections between this and Spider-Man, because clearly this got him the Spider-Man job eventually. And so you have these sequences where you're seeing inside of Peyton's mind, and there's just these weird flashes of different things. And it just sort of is when Peter Parker gets bit by the spider, or when his spider sense is going off. There's this crazy shot after Peyton is just beaten and tortured and burned to a crisp, and he goes flying out of a fucking exploding building, and you see Frances McDormand looking at the exploded building, and it just transitions to her standing there in shock to standing in front of a grave. And it's kind of awkward and it feels dated, but it's also kind of awesome too.
Yeah. There's also the scene at the end where, not the end, but when he kills the helicopter, that whole sequence of him hanging onto the hook and swinging through. I mean, he's basically swinging through the cityscape, which Spider-Man, it also kind of feels especially ending with that crash, it feels like a precursor to Terminator 2. It feels like a precursor to The Matrix. There's so many action movie sequences that I feel borrowed from that scene alone of, Darkman hanging from the hook and the bad guys thinking they're going to swing the good guy into a building. Yeah. It just... even he goes crashing into the office window, and there's the little joke where he's oh, pardon me, as he gets pulled out. That to me feels almost Avengers-esque.
Yes,
Like
yes,
it feels like Joss Whedon like used that scene in the Avengers when like they're in the Battle of New York at the end.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. One other thing, I don't want to. I want to make sure I don't forget this, but after he is burned and then he escapes from the hospital, he finds a abandoned. He finds his burnt out lab and basically like restructures it, and that's just like Spider-Man 2 with Doctor Octopus.
Doc Ock, yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
I mean, there's so many comparisons.
You always bring up. I know you always bring up, especially for like our horror channel. You always bring up the scene in Spider-Man 2 where Doc Ock is like they're trying to remove the arms after he is like fused together, and that scene where he wakes up after, that's very reminiscent of Darkman in the hospital and the woman who is an uncredited, I think her name is Jenny Agutter. She was the girlfriend in American Werewolf in London.
Oh,
Love
that's
her.
cool.
Yeah, she's like this surgeon who's explaining in like a very quick little exposition dump that, like, you mentioned that scene where the building explodes and you just see his like burnt body go flying up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's one of the best parts of the movie.
Yeah, they like find him and he was so burned that they had to sever his nerves to prevent him from feeling all the pain. But now the problem is he can't feel pain. So without pain sensors, his emotions are out of control, which is what basically leads him to becoming the character that he is. Like he can handle so much damage, and he's also like psychotically insane for revenge. And the scene that stuck with me as a kid more than any scene in this movie was the carnival scene.
Oh, okay.
Where he bends the guy teases him about the elephant, and again it's that like crazy Spider-Man, like the camera zooms in on him while there's like explosions going off in his mind.
Right.
And he just like grabs the guy's fingers and wrenches them in like this. It almost feels like the guy is made of silly putty. Right. And it's that scene freaked me out as a kid.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because I mean that scene is pretty iconic. They show it randomly, like there's GIFs of it and stuff on Twitter sometimes. One scene that always stood out to me is a bit more subtle than that, but it's when he's doing his experimenting. He's trying to figure out how to like fix his face, get his mask to work longer, and his hand is by a flame, and then his hand goes on fire, and he doesn't even realize it. I think that's a great way to just show that, like, he doesn't feel pain, and it just kind of emphasizes the tragedy. It's so great, like the music, and then just the way he looks. It really is this sort of like, Beauty and the Beast, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. This kind of like this freakish guy that's just hiding out in an abandoned building.
Or sleeping under a box in like a river puddle.
yeah. That's when he first gets out of the hospital and it's just torrential rain in the city. Yeah, I love that. But just to kind of go along with it, and also the key one, I totally forgot to mention this, but like the Phantom of the Opera, that's like the most on the nose, right? Or the most lack of nose. His physical makeup is really, really great. And Liam Neeson does a fantastic job, like talking through that. He's able to make his little teeth kind of go up and down, and he has that little chuckle at one point, like towards the end. I love it. We should talk about Liam Neeson then too. Like Liam Neeson is just so unhinged in this. He kind of doesn't seem like Liam Neeson in any other movie. Like, can you think of any other character he's played that's as wacky as Darkman gets?
No, I mean, he's like even now I don't want to say that he's gone into self-parody, but like he does like play himself. He like so just to give you an example, he like showed up at a Rangers game the other night, a New York Rangers game at the Garden, and they like put him on the screen, and he like he kind of like acted like he was his character in Taken, and it was like this like really funny moment. And I feel like he's either like the badass tough guy, like he is in Taken and all these like Taken since then. Like he's done like all these like one word title
like
movies.
the Gray, Nonstop.
Yeah. Right. And he's not at all like cackling mad in those movies. He's like angry and tough guy.
Right.
And then there's movies where he's like a phenomenal dramatic actor.
Yeah.
I know this is going to sound completely ridiculous, but the end. Have you ever seen Schindler's List?
Of course.
So the end of Schindler's List, one of my favorite parts of any movie that I've ever seen, when he has his breakdown of like, I could have done more.
Right. Yeah.
To me, that there are parts of him like emotionally breaking down, like when after he like breaks that guy's arm and bends it all over, his face starts to bubble and he like looks at Frances McDormand and has like this panic sadness of like, and it reminded me, like, not even close to being the same movie, of course, but it reminded me of just that, that like panic sadness at the end of Schindler's List, where he's like, I could have done more. I could have done more. I could have given my watch. I could have, and it's funny because this movie came out in 1990, and 3 years later he's nominated for an Oscar for Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And he's making all these like great dramatic movies. I think he played Rob Roy. I think he played Michael Collins. He's doing these like European like historical dramas. He does Nell with Jodie Foster, which was like, I think she might have gotten an Oscar nomination for that. I don't remember, but it was like, he did that. And obviously after the tragedy involving his wife, he kind of went, back to like I'm just going to make fun, gritty action movies now.
Yeah.
But yeah, like he's fantastic. And so Frances McDormand, though, did you read any of the IMDb stuff where apparently, so first of all, as big of a Sam Raimi fan as I am, I didn't realize how close he was apparently with the Coen brothers.
That's right.
And I didn't realize that according to IMDb, Joel Coen was the editor or edited Evil Dead. So I'm like, wait a minute, what?
I didn't see that, but I thought that like, didn't they all live together at one point?
Apparently, yeah. And Joel Coen is married to Frances McDormand. They've been together for 30-something years.
Right.
So like Frances McDormand, I think, was like a late replacement for the actress that they had. Right. And apparently like Sam Raimi and her did not get along on set.
No.
And it's funny if like you've paid attention to her, like despite like winning 2 Oscars in like the last 5 years, she always comes across as this like, whenever there's like an award show, she always shows up like she doesn't have a fancy dress on and she's just like, all right, I'm here. Oh, I won. All right, great. Thank you. Joel, I'll see you at home. Like she looks like she can't possibly be bothered.
Right.
Except when the camera starts rolling and she's Frances McDormand.
Right.
And I know you love the TV show Fargo. And of course that was her first Oscar.
Yes. And I was going to say, like, for this character, she said, that's the first time I played a bimbo. And it's weird because, like, I don't really think of Julie as a bimbo. I mean, she's an attorney. I don't really think she does anything. She's pretty caring, actually. She still wants to be with Peyton, regardless of... God.
I wouldn't call her a bimbo at all. I do think it's kind of weird that they do basically, say it without saying it, that she ends up in a relationship with Strack after she's 100% sure that he's a criminal, and she doesn't put 2 and 2 together to think that that's the reason why Peyton's lab just blew up.
Right.
But so there's that. But I also, did you see apparently there's a rumor that while Darkman is being swung by the hook, the car that almost hits him is the Sam Raimi Delta.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. You see it.
And the rumor is that the Coen brothers are the two guys driving the car.
Driving it. Yeah,
but
yeah.
Apparently, I've also read that if you pause it and look at the two guys driving, it looks nothing like the Coen brothers.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I don't know if that was like, you know,
an urban legend.
An urban legend.
Yeah.
But it's fun to think about that, like, you have the Coen brothers who always, they're some of the most eclectic filmmakers ever. Like, they dabble in like almost horror to musical comedy to westerns. You know, they've won multiple Oscars for writing. They did Fargo, right? I'm not.
Yes.
Yes. They did Fargo. They did No Country for Old Men,
Raising
True
Arizona,
Grit, Miller's Crossing. Yeah, like they've done like every genre that's out there. They've done a movie in, and you know it's. Oh, of course. Oh God, if I didn't mention Lebowski, somebody would have hit me up in the comments.
Yes.
My dad loved what do you call it? Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? That was like one of my dad's favorite movies.
Yeah, Sherry loved that too. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's cool that they are so close to Sam Raimi, or at least they were close to him at this point, and that's what brought them Frances McDormand. You know, I've never seen the movie Blood Simple, but I think Sam Raimi has some connection to that movie, or he's involved in somehow in the filming of it. And I think there's like angles and stuff in that movie that are similar to angles that are in The Evil Dead and in all of his things. But, you know, we talked about kind of visually how it's similar to Spider-Man and how story-wise it's similar to RoboCop. I think that one thing that's kind of interesting too is that there's this advanced tech in it. It's this sort of older gothic kind of tragic story, but then you have this kind of advanced tech for 1990. I mean, he essentially has like a fucking 3D printer, even though he's like printing flesh, right? And the masks that he makes, they're like the masks they use in Mission Impossible, in the Mission Impossible movies.
Yeah.
You know,
it's way ahead of its time.
And one of my favorite parts of the movie, which is way ahead of its time too, is when he eventually gets ambushed by all of Durant's men. The Smiley is in his lab and he fights Smiley, but then Smiley's left alone in there, and there's the little bird that's going like this. I forget what you call those, but like the bird that like clicks back and forth, and it goes like a pendulum bird. That sounds right. And you know, it's gonna go hit the lighter, and there's gas streaming throughout the lab. And he goes over to get it, and he finally makes it to it, but then it's just a hologram. And I thought that was so cool when I first saw that. You know?
Yeah.
So it's just interesting how, like, even though it's this gothic kind of thing that's like inspired by like the Invisible Man and the Hunchback from Notre Dame, it also has this like cool, you know, modern effects too. So I mean, yeah, it's really, really great, and it's just a real fucking treat to get to see it. What else you got for Darkman?
I mean, it's the kind of movie that I'll always have a thing for this movie. My dad would let me watch basically anything, but I think I've mentioned this before. For some reason, he had a Raimi block when I was a kid. And I think it had to do with the Evil Dead 2 box with like the skull on it scaring me.
Yeah.
And so he wouldn't let me watch Evil Dead or Evil Dead 2. And he wouldn't let me watch Darkman. And for years, this was like the movie that it came out when we were 8 years old. And this was like the movie I was begging, like every time we were in the video store. Come on, please. Darkman. No, not Darkman. Anything else. The Exorcist. Fine. What? Like, how does that make sense? And eventually he caved in. And I remember he loved this movie also. He thought it was so much fun. And I was just like I have like the old fashioned like flip covered DVD.
Yes.
It has 0 features on it. It's basically just a movie.
Right.
And it's a great example of, like, I think you really did a great job tying in all the Spider-Man stuff. Like, Sam Raimi does get the credit that he deserves from the superhero community. When people like talk about the MCU, people always kind of go back to either, you know, X-Men in 2000 or his Spider-Man, especially 1 and 2, of course.
right.
in the very early 2000s, and as basically proving that, believe it or not, superhero movies can make shitloads of money and be really good.
Yes.
And everybody who watches those movies, it's so obvious. Like if you watch Darkman, it's so obvious the connection from, you know, point A, 1990 Darkman, to point B, the Spider-Man movies. And it's also so obvious that here's a guy who wanted to make a superhero movie. And, you know, he wanted to do The Shadow. He couldn't. They ended up making a Shadow movie in the 90s, right? With Alec Baldwin, I think.
Alec Baldwin. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I never saw that.
Probably because you never saw The Shadow with Alec Baldwin?
No.
That's interesting. Okay. Did you ever see The Phantom?
That's what I was going to say. I saw The Phantom, which I remember because it's Billy Zane in a very, very purple suit.
Yes.
But I liked The Phantom. I thought it was a fun little, you know, I was like probably 13 when I saw it, but I liked it. It's not something I'm running out to watch again. But, right. I mean,
that's the whole thing. That's this time period.
Darkman just hit such a perfect sweet spot of like, you could totally see the horror director who did the Evil Dead movies. I mean, if you look at Evil Ash in Army of Darkness, like it looks like Darkman.
Yeah,
and
right.
You could totally see the that like sense of humor with the graphic violence of Evil Dead 2 becoming a superhero, like going into the superhero genre and becoming Darkman.
Yeah.
And you know, like it's just it's a perfect little movie. It goes so fast. There's no wasted motion in this movie. It just goes from like boom, scene, boom, like Durant, like the helicopter crashes, and then the next scene he's there wearing the Durant mask. He shows up and they're going up to the top of the thing. And you're like, oh, so we're going from like one bad guy, you know, collision to the next bad guy collision. And that's also right after like the whole scene where he's taking out all the goons in the building. It's such a fast paced kick-ass movie. And I feel like a movie like this, again, if it was made today, I feel like this would be 2 hours and 10 minutes. There'd be added CG where there didn't have to be. And, and you know, there'd be a lot of, you know, probably 30 to 40 minutes of setup instead of like just 15 minutes.
Yeah.
This movie is, it's an hour and 36 minutes, and it doesn't even feel that long. It doesn't even feel that long. It feels like it's 85 minutes.
Yeah.
It just zips by.
Yep. Yeah.
They don't make movies like this anymore. They don't, you know.
Yeah, I know we sound kind of like old men saying something like that, but yeah, this movie
When I was young.
When I was it's from that time. It's that time of like The Rocketeer and The Phantom and The Shadow and Dick Tracy. They're all these sort of like older IPs trying to capture that Batman success. And I think that this one is truly the one that is the most kind of like raw and like exciting. The other ones are like visually cool, but this one is the most like violent and exciting.
Yeah.
And like can hold its own against Batman. So yeah, I'm really, really glad that you
know it also came out right in between, or it came out 2 years after Die Hard and the same year as Die Hard 2.
Oh.
And there's a lot of like Die Hard style action in this movie.
Agreed.
You brought up The Rocketeer, and I think like it's a perfect, like, The Rocketeer is a movie where dad and mom can take the kids and go enjoy like a nice action adventure movie on the weekends. And then your older brother is going to take you without your parents knowing to see fucking Darkman.
Shit, yeah.
And I think like that's the perfect. And like, I love it. Like you just made me want to like find Dick Tracy and why. I feel like some of these movies are so hard to find now also. Like
Yeah, it wasn't streaming. I know it was on Shudder for a while, wasn't it? Wasn't Darkman on Shudder?
It might have been. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to pull out the old DVD. I told Charlotte, because I watched this the other day, and I said to her, I was like, look, I just watched this movie, but I fucking love it, and it's so good, and I want to watch it again. So if you want to watch it, let's go.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it was really awesome to go back and watch this. I'm glad that we added this, even though it's like, well, is it like Evil Dead? Well, no, but like it's made by Sam Raimi, and it just has that sort of that
And
fun.
we only hinted at it, but it does have an amazing little Bruce Campbell cameo at the end,
Yeah.
where he like runs away from Frances McDormand, tells her she should go off, live her life,
Yeah.
and it's Liam Neeson doing the voiceover. I'm everyone and no one.
Right.
Call me Darkman. And then he turns and it's fucking Bruce Campbell, and you're like, yeah, let's go.
Yes. Yes. And that's so Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man too, because it's like he can't be with Mary Jane. He has to be by himself. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Yeah. I was going to say that, we've covered Sam Raimi movies so far in our road to Evil Dead 3. And now that we're moving forward, I think we're going to actually go over to a Bruce Campbell movie. And so you and I were talking about doing Maniac Cop. But did you want to tell people what else we were covering too this month?
Well, we just posted our review of Yellow Jackets seasons. We have a season 1 recap.
Right.
And we reviewed episodes 1 and 2 of season 2. Just went up on the channel on Sunday.
Correct.
And we are going to be getting together every weekend, probably
Right.
Saturday mornings,
Right.
to review the latest episodes of Yellow Jackets. So if you like Yellow Jackets, tune into our channel. And if you liked Pete and Sherry's reviews on the Anchor Pete channel, leave your comments for Sherry in the comments, and Pete will ask her and get her responses, and she'll respond in the comments.
That's good.
Because we actually had a comment on our last video asking where Sherry was, and you mentioned she had retired from YouTube, but I'm sure she's watching the show with you still, and I'm sure she has thoughts. And I'd love to actually hear some of her thoughts too, because Athena doesn't watch it with me. She only watched the first 2 episodes, so I'd really love to hear like a woman's point of view on it.
Yeah. She loved that last episode, and that last episode was a lot of fun to talk about with you. So
yeah,
if this season, the rest of the season is going to be like episode 2, oh boy, I'm on board.
So yeah, we're covering Yellow Jackets. We are marching towards Evil Dead Rise. We have reviews of Scream 6. We have reviews of Drag Me to Hell, Evil Dead 2013. I have a bunch of YouTube shorts where I just find random horror movies on my streaming services and I watch them. I'm going to Nighthawk Cinema later tonight for a screening of Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2. So lick my plate, you dog dicks. And I will probably... You never saw Texas Chainsaw 2, did you?
No.
That's a famous Bill Moseley line in the movie.
Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't threatening the audience.
I've only seen the original Texas Chainsaw, and I've seen it multiple times, but I've never seen any of the sequels or the remake. Or anything.
So here's how you watch the Texas Chainsaw franchise.
Okay.
You watch part 1, then you have a few drinks, and you watch part 2, and then you pretend that there are no other Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies ever made.
Okay. Sounds pretty easy. I can do that.
Toby Hooper directs the first 2. You cannot ask for 2 more different movies. The visceral terror of the first movie, and then part 2, it's almost like Evil Dead 2 and Evil Dead, where you have this like guttural, visceral, gory fucking horror movie, and then part 2 is horror, but also slapstick.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely bizarre. You have an amazing Bill Moseley performance. Caroline Williams is fucking great. I can't wait to watch it again tonight in theaters. So I'll probably do a short review of that coming up on the channel tomorrow. But aside from that, I think we're good.
Yeah, man. Thanks for all the plugging. As you guys can see, Danny puts out a lot of content, and together we always make at least one video per week together as well. So if you like me and Danny, make sure that you're subscribed to the Lastercast. And we're going to continue our march to Evil Dead Rise with next week's Maniac Cop.